yourself, mate? You sort of
I'm from Wellington originally, came here for 3 months in 2002.
and never left. 20 years later, you're still here.
Yeah.
I love that. It's great.
Great place to live.
Kids, family, the whole...
Oh, it's amazing. Eh? I was out on the street and there was people up from Wellington and on holiday, and people everywhere. Eh? I remember 3 guys having coffee, and they were all moved here in the last 10 years, and all for different reasons. And
Yeah, a lot of people coming.
it's pretty cool. Eh? It's a great place. Yeah. All right.
Can I just drop back?
You just tell me when you're ready. And we'll...
Cheers, mate.
Yeah, well, I'm ready right now, so...
You're ready to go?
Yeah.
Good. You guys are ready? Hey, well, first thing I want to say thank you for coming out to Napier to be with us today. I've been here today really doing 2 things already. First and foremost, I went along to Hastings Boys High School and talked to the boys about leadership there. And then saw a great program that they've got around what they call the Hasting Boys High Building Academy. Pretty special, very good partnership between local construction firms and the school, and actually training a great cadre of young guys who are actually going to build a Kayanga Ora State house on the property and then have it moved off and put on site, and they hope to do up to 2 or 3 a year next year as well. So really amazing program, actually really great to see young men going into the trades in that way and being well supported to do so by the school. And then I went and met with a lovely couple who started a business called Shoe Science, which is a store in Havelock North. Unfortunately got robbed, and as you know, crime's a major issue in this part of the world, but also around the rest of the country. And so it was good just to talk with them. They got robbed twice in a very short period of time. And then today, meeting with some other business leaders through the course of the day, and then heading home this afternoon. So with that, happy to take any questions you may have.
What kind of issues did you talk about with the crime at that shop?
Yeah, well, just in general, and I was actually, I was just having a coffee and talking to different people in the public as well who just came up, and there are real genuine concerns around gangs, particularly in the Hawke's Bay. It's in part why Mark Mitchell and I have talked a lot about the need for a different gang policy. And our view very clearly is that we should have a dedicated gang unit. We proposed several months ago 4 actions, which were really around making sure that we can ban gang patches in public. We're already banned in government buildings. 2, to give real dispersal notices to break up gangs in public spaces where they're becoming a nuisance. Thirdly, make sure we've got these non-consorting provisions where serious crimes about to be committed that can be broken up. And then obviously firearm prohibition orders that we need to desperately crack down on illegal guns, which is a big part of why we've seen violent crime up 21%, gang membership up 45%. So there's a lot of underlying concern around gangs and crime in general across New Zealand, and I think we need to be much tougher than we have been.
There's already a police gang focused unit in Hawke's Bay.
Sorry, say that, mate?
There's already a police gang focused unit in Hawke's Bay. Is that not good enough?
What we want is a dedicated national gang unit, like we've seen in New South Wales, Western Australia, Queensland, where it's been in place for a long time and proven to be very successful. And it just means that anyone who has any interaction with a gang member, whether it's a traffic infringement, whether it's actually a gang pad that might be out of building spec, all of that gets picked up and dealt with by a dedicated gang unit. But then, as I said, these 4 actions to give police more powers and more tools to ultimately deal with them.
That's something we're probably seeing here in Hawke's Bay. We've had a little flurry of ram raids. It's pretty common around the whole country. Some things shop owners have said, perhaps the one you spoke to would be they'd like to see police a bit better funded. Is that something you'd like to see?
Yeah, well, we want to make sure we give the police all the resources and tools that they need to do their job. I talk to police officers many times a week, and I can tell you they are deeply dedicated, deeply passionate, want to get on and do the job. We want police to be police, and we want to be able to get them back to basics of policing. At the moment, they're often acting as social workers, they're acting as a whole bunch of different capacities, rather than actually getting into the policing work that they need to do. I think on the ram raider front, the big thing that is, I think, a big contributor to that is what we have in New Zealand is only 46% of our kids going to school regularly at the moment. We have 100,000 kids across New Zealand that are chronically truant, and we've had thousands of kids unenrolled from schools and disconnected from schools. And that is it can't be all explained by COVID and illness, less than half of it actually is. There's something else going on where we have not been able to get kids back into school. And that is a government responsibility, it's also a school responsibility, but it's also very much a parental responsibility to wake up 7 a.m, get the kids to school, get them in the front gates, because if you really want them to have opportunities and be able to get ahead, that's so important they get to school. And I think that's part of one of the big contributors, I'd say, to ram rates. I think we've got a lot of repeat offenders, a small group of repeat ram raiders, and I think we need to ask about the consequences of those decisions, and actually are we using the tools that we have available in the justice system in the way that we should be using it. And then I think a lot of it's continuing to do the work of social investment and working with community organisations, and as I say, freeing up police so they can actually do the frontline policing that they want to do, rather than a lot of social work and babysitting, which is what's going on.
Any view on the repeal of 3 strikes?
Yeah, we don't support the repeal of it. We think fundamentally this is a piece of legislation designed for the most serious offenders in New Zealand, and we think it's been a useful deterrent. We think, again, it just sends a message that the government's soft on crime, and so from our point of view, we opposed it, the repeal of it. We think at this time, when New Zealand has a 21% increase in violent crime, a 31% increase in retail crime, 45% growth in gangs, just sends the wrong message.
Last week we had the Prime Minister through, and she was opening up some public housing here. Housing is a big issue in Hawke's Bay as it is all across the country. One thing she said to reporters when she came was doing a lot of catch-up here, insinuating that the previous national government didn't do enough with public housing. Your response to that?
What I'd say to her is that she's had 5 years in government, and her government has utterly abject failed on every single level on housing. House prices have gone up over $400,000 to over $1 million. We now have a situation with interest rates. We've had our 4th interest rate rise consecutively. Homeowners are going to be doing it incredibly tough from here on through. Rents are up $150 just in 4 years, in part because some of the actions they've taken around putting taxes on landlords, like extending Brightline, removing interest deductibility. We've had a 4-fold increase in people on the state housing list in less than 4 years, going from 6,000 to 28,000, I think it is now. And today there's 4,000 families waking up in emergency motel accommodation, as we've seen, and that's a huge increase in what we've seen. $1 million being spent there a day, and we've now got 4 times the number of people living in cars than when she came to power. So I think, frankly, 5 years into a government, a lot of talk, a lot of spin, no outcomes, no delivery, poor execution, and really got to stop making excuses and start getting on and actually getting some things done.
Well, the former national government got rid of a lot of the state houses, and that's partly what's caused this increase. Do you agree with that policy?
No, I don't. What I agree with is we need Kāinga Ora to build as many state houses as possible, but the thing that we're not doing well in New Zealand versus other advanced economies is using the community housing providers, empowering them up so they can get on and build houses as well. When I've seen complexes like the Salvation Army, different Māori property trusts actually going on and being powered up and having access to capital to get building as well, that's what we desperately need in this country. We have, I think, maybe 10 to 12% of our houses built with other community housing providers, and it's an and, not an or. Both need to be foot on the accelerator happening. But our big problem is we can't access land and actually build houses fast enough, and that's about resource planning, it's about consenting. Consenting times have doubled. There's a whole bunch of challenges that we've created about being very, very slow on building houses.
So was the national government's decision to get rid of all those houses the wrong thing to do?
I think the national government did, over the period of that government, I'd take that record over this government's record any day of the week.
But did they do the wrong thing?
They worked their way through trying to make sure they could access and build more state houses, and essentially what this government's doing is failing to do it on all four counts: rental, home ownership, state housing, emergency housing, people and cars.
How does Hawke's Bay compare to Hawaii?
Well, I love the Hawke's Bay. I've been here many, many times. I spent a lot of time here, certainly in my old life in New Zealand, trying to build demand for services and economic development down here. This is my second visit here as a leader this year, and this is a region that I think is being let down by a Labour government. And you think about tourism and how they haven't supported tourism, and there's a lot of work to do there. We've got massive labour shortages across horticulture at the moment, because we've got our immigration settings completely blocked up. And we need to liberate and let our business people get on with things and get growing businesses again here.
Would you like to take your family on holiday here rather than Hawaii?
I'll take my family holidaying anywhere, New Zealand, overseas, wherever I want to go. Yep.
How are you going to win the seats back? Because they're pretty, strongholdish at the moment. Well,
No, I think you've got, I think in both Napier and Tuki, they're small majorities currently, and I think we can definitely win these seats back, and we're going to have strong candidates appearing for both of those electorates. Our intention is to fight hard and to be able to make our case to the people of the Hawke's Bay and make our case as to why we're an alternative government waiting. And I think we have some very good candidates, and we've got to fight really hard for that for next year.
So what are you going to talk to? Are you going to talk to your party members after this, yeah?
I'll talk to some party members now, and then I go talk to a business luncheon after this as well.
What are you going to talk to them about?
The business luncheon?
Oh, yeah, party members, yeah.
Oh, just generally, we talk about, it's an answer for them to, as members and supporters, to ask some questions about where we are and what they're thinking about and what are issues that are important to them. How do they feel the issues are locally here on the ground? It's a good source of information about how they're feeling about things. And then with the local business owners, it'll be the issues that they're encountering as well. And the themes are pretty common. The massive amounts of labour shortages, huge amounts of bureaucracy costs and compliance coming their way, and real difficulty in many ways getting ahead and maximising the opportunities that their businesses have. Cool.
You mentioned earlier, with coming back to housing for a minute, you mentioned one big issue we're seeing is rental increases have gone up a lot, massive issue here in Hawke's Bay, and you did mention just quickly there's been some new, well not new, but there's restrictions on landlords that have been brought in under this government. If you were in charge, what would you do to help that space in terms of making it easier for landlords to tenant out properties? Yeah,
look, I mean, the real problem in the rental market is, as I said, prices have gone up $150 per week in rents. To rent the same house than you had 4 years ago is an extra $7,500 after tax you got to find. And a big part of it is the government was advised, do not extend the bright line test, do not remove interest deductibility. The Inland Revenue Department and others said that'll only just lead to higher rents, and that's exactly what's happened. We think there's $50 per week that's been added because of those two taxes on landlords, and as a result, supply and quality of houses is diminished. So we're going to unwind those two moves by the government, because we think that's been incredibly unhelpful for the rental market. But there's also more things that we need to do. Overseas, there's very strong development around what's called build to rent, where you actually have developers come in, build a big set of rental properties, and actually hold that for 50 years or longer, and generate a consistent return. And I think that sort of product is what we need in the marketplace as well. So there's things that we could do around the Overseas Investment Office to encourage that. There's certainly pools of capital here in New Zealand, whether it's around the super funds and other now we've got KiwiSaver sort of starting to come up a bit. Those funds can be invested in some of those projects as well. So there's a lot that we need to do on all aspects of housing. It starts with, firstly, liberating land so we can build houses. We live in a country the same size as Japan and the UK, and yet we have much more expensive housing with a lot less people. And a lot of that's to do with our regulations about consenting. It's very slow, unlocking land and getting houses actually built. And then that flows through to rentals, that flows through to state housing, it flows through to emergency housing.
How would you help first-time buyers in that space? Because some of these initiatives you talked about will help to get first-time buyers into the market, I guess. Yeah, well, the reality is we need to be able to get first-time buyers into the market. We are a party that believes fundamentally in home ownership, because we think when people own a home, they're more invested, they care deeply about the community they're part of, they care about the schools, they care about the local government. And so we need to work much harder at that. There's things that we could possibly look like shared equity schemes, help to build schemes, but the biggest thing we can do is actually get land consented and get houses built. We take a long time to consent land, and resource consents have doubled over 10 years. Developers are spending $1.3 billion a year on that. And when you look at other places around the world, it doesn't take as long to build a house like it does here in New Zealand. Cool. Awesome, guys. Thanks for your time. Appreciate it. Right.
Good to see you. Take care. See you again.